So hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. I'm going to let everyone get on, and then we're going to get started because we have a lot of great information to cover tonight, and we're really excited about it. So let me just wait just a few more seconds. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just start off with the CE part of it because it's really important. So good afternoon and welcome to your Benco webinar, Gateway 2021, Crossing the Bridge into Dentistry. My name is Kay Huff and I will be your Benco host for this afternoon. Before we get started, I want to go over a few CE guidelines. Number one, it's really important that if you want CEs for this program tonight, please make sure you registered in your legal name. What I mean by that is the name that's on your license. Also, if you're logging in on a cell phone and you're just watching it, you're in good, if you're actually pushing the button, you're good. If you're just listening, we can't see that. All we can see is your telephone number. So what I'll need you to do, and I'll give this to you at the end also, is I'll need you to send me your name, your telephone number, and the title of tonight's course to practicecoaching@benco.com. Again, that's practicecoaching@benco.com. It is really important to make sure that everyone stays on for the complete hour in order to be able to receive your CEs. And then also, we really want your input. We want to know, like, what are your questions? We want to answer them for you. So at the very bottom, you're going to see a Q&A. So during the presentation, please make sure that you type in those questions and we'll make sure we answer them for you throughout the webinar. Also, at the end of the webinar, we'll make sure everyone who asks questions receives a copy of the Q&A. So please make sure you get ready to ask some great questions. So with that being said, I would love to start off by introducing a co-host for this afternoon and an amazing leader who I absolutely love working with, one of the managing directors at Benco Dental, Chuck Cohen. Good afternoon, Chuck.
Hey, Kay, nice to see you too. Thanks for the fabulous introduction. We have a lot of great information to share with you this evening. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's one of our most popular topics, all about preventive maintenance, how to take care of the equipment in your office. It's something that we are super passionate about at Benco, and it's something that our friends at Midmark are also passionate about. So without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to Sarah Seaton of Midmark, who is our sponsor this evening, and she's going to spend a few minutes talking about Midmark and some of the great products and services that they have there. Sarah, nice to see you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chuck. I appreciate that introduction. What we wanted to do is we're broadcasting live over Sales, Ohio at our new Experience Center. And we wanted to take a few minutes to show you how a properly designed sterilization center incorporating the instrument processing workflow can really have an impact on your overall production and productivity in your office. And in fact, a lot of our customers who've redesigned their sterilization centers have added things like a window. And what they're doing with their patients is they're actually walking them by in the instrument processing area or the sterilization center, and they're showing them all the ways that they're keeping them safe. And as everybody knows, now more than ever, safety is top of mind. And patients want to understand what happens, and really with the great design of a sterilization center, it can become a showpiece for you that you can be proud of and really further develop those relationships with your patients and by showing them how you're keeping them safe. But there's a lot that goes on in instrument processing. In fact, did you know that your assistants go to this area between 80 and 100 times per day to get instruments or to sterilize or whatever they might be doing? But what we see in the field is about 75% of the sterilization centers or instrument processing areas are undersized. So what we'd like to do today is take a look at what happens and walk through one example of what a good instrument processing area can look like. So we're going to walk over here and show you what we've got. So following the CDC processes, they've lined out simple 5-step process that needs to be followed to ensure that instruments are sterile and are ready for that next patient. It is 5 steps, starting with cleaning, receiving and decontaminating, preparation and packaging, sterilization, monitoring, and then finally storage. Okay? And as we've got here, this is what we call a straight line sterilization center. And it goes a one-way flow from dirty to clean. And your teammates will never have to go backwards, which could provide an opportunity for cross-contamination. contamination. You always want to make sure you're working in one direction during cleaning. And that's where that good design with workflow in mind comes into play. Okay. So what we see here is this receiving, cleaning, and decontamination should be a very large section. There's a lot that happens here. They're bringing the instruments here in a covered container, and when they drop them off for cleaning, you want to make sure that they're using an automated cleaner. And in this center, we have the ultrasonic cleaner recessed to provide a clean look. When they clean the instruments, you want to make sure that you're providing them the proper PPE for the whole process, actually throughout the whole sterilization center. You want to make sure they're equipped with utility gloves to protect them from sharps injuries, and that you have goggles and all the proper PPE to be safe in this area. So some of the pitfalls that we've seen happen in this first section we call the cleaning area is that it's not big enough. There's not enough counter space. Another area that has to happen is when after they clean the instruments using an automatic cleaner, is what we recommend, is they want to make sure there's a sink big enough to accommodate the basket. Because after they clean the instruments, they come down here and they rinse the instruments and they inspect them to ensure that the instrument actually got cleaned and that there's not any bioburden left on those instruments. Okay. The next step is preparation and packaging. So the instruments came in dirty, we've cleaned them, we've inspected them, and we've dried them. That's key. You want to make sure the instruments are dried before you package them up. And a great way to support them is through cabinetry that's designed for sterilization, that's laid out and simply to support the tools that they need, the supplies, whether you're using cassettes or maybe you're using pouches. That in this space, your team has to have enough space to arrange the instruments in proper sets, load them again into the cassettes or into the pouches if you're using pouches. You want to make sure that all the supplies are here, whether it's the tape, etc. So they're going to pouch them and get them all prepped to go into the next step, which is sterilizing. Okay. With sterilizing, it's steam sterilizers, obviously is what Midmark sells, happens to be one of the most popular methods for sterilization. Some of the keys to sterilization is proper loading of the sterilizer. So you want to make sure that you leave enough room for free flow of the steam and heat to reach all those instruments. You want to make sure that you're not overloading and jamming in too many instruments at the last minute. Okay. If you're using pouches, the CDC recommends that pouches be on edge, as I've got here, with our pouch rack. Midmark, with all of our new units, provides a pouch rack to facilitate that loading. If you have other pouches or if you don't have a pouch rack, we want to make sure, if you're using a pouch rack, you always want to make sure you put that pouch rack on that lowest level, again, to allow the heat to come through for drying. And then if you have other pouches that you want to load, you want to make sure that you're putting them paper side down, again, to allow for that free flow of steam and to effectively dry. The other piece with sterilization is you want to make sure that you allow the instruments to dry in the sterilizer. You don't want to be taking those wet packs out. The packs in the wrap is designed for sterility to open up to allow the heat and the steam to get to that instrument, but as that packaging dries, it closes back up and provides that sterile barrier. So you want to make sure that they're fully dry before you put them in the sterilizer. Okay. The next step is monitoring. Monitoring is composed of three parts: mechanical, chemical, and biological. With Midmark, we have an automatic data logger that you can install on your sterilizer, which captures all of that mechanical information that the CDC recommends that you keep. And then the chemical indicators are going to be in your pouches or your packs. And then the biological indicator is really where that rubber meets the road from a sterility perspective. That's telling you that the sterilizer is killing the spores in that test. And you really want to make sure that your unit is properly maintained and that we're killing those spores on a weekly basis at a minimum is the recommendation from the CDC. Okay? And you need to keep those records as long as your local state authorities indicate. Every state has different regulations for that. Okay? The other thing is you can see here In our sterilization tower, our sterilizers are on these pull-out shelves to make it easy to facilitate loading and cleaning of those sterilizers. You want to make sure that you have cover surfaces that can support these beasts, because if you've ever tried to lift one, they're quite heavy, about 90 pounds heavy. So you want to make sure they're properly supported. The last step in the process is storing. Now, storing can be done either event or date driven, and you want to make sure that it's in a clean, dry space, okay, and covered away from water. You never want to put it underneath the sink or anything like that, okay? And in our sterilization center here, we've got the blue light that indicate clean instruments are stored here. So next, and that's the 5-step process. And again, an efficient workflow can really drive production for you. Because as you know, your patients come to see you. You need to have those instruments ready when that patient needs that procedure done. And the procedure can't move forward unless you have those instruments. And having a properly designed sterilization center can really drive that production so that you always have those instruments ready for your patients when they're here. Now, next, I'd like to introduce my teammate, Renee, and she's going to walk through those critical steps for performing maintenance to your Midmark sterilizers. Renee?
Thanks, Sarah. And you're right, it's absolutely imperative to understand and follow the correct process for proper sterilization. It's vital for infection control. It's also understanding and following the correct maintenance of your sterilizer is so vital to promote uninterrupted flow of instrument processing. So that's what I'm going to help you out with today. With each sterilizer, you get an in-depth user guide, and you also get this quick reference use guide. So maintenance, when and how. Fortunately, the sterilizer will tell you or remind you when. When is every 7 days. It's going to remind you it's time for weekly maintenance. On the 28th day, it tells you it's time for a much deeper monthly maintenance. We're just going to step through that real quick. But on a daily basis, it's important that you wipe down your sterilizer every day with a disinfectant. Now, you do want to keep in mind that it needs to be a quaternary cleaner to clean your surfaces externally. You do want to make sure that the unit is cool whenever you do your maintenance on your daily basis, because there is some internal surfaces that you will want to wipe down, namely your door gasket and its mating surfaces, so that it has a nice good seal, okay? The only other thing that I would suggest for that daily maintenance is if you use a surgical milk or a rust inhibitor on your instruments, it's important to drain your reservoir on a daily basis. And I'll walk through that process during the weekly maintenance, which is a little bit more in depth. So to help us out to remember, it seems like a whole lot, right? Well, to help us remember, just at a quick glance, how to operate your sterilizer, but also at a quick glance, how to maintain your sterilizer. This laminated quick reference sheet is phenomenal. I highly recommend that you keep it close to your sterilizer in an easy visual place. So I just walked through the daily maintenance. Weekly maintenance, it involves more of cleaning your internal surfaces. So when you're doing that, you're gonna drain the reservoir and refill it with clean distilled water, as well as wipe your surfaces. So to drain your reservoir, you'll want to unclip your hose, and then of course just point it down so that it does allow gravity to drain the water out of your sterilizer reservoir. If you see this indicating line, this tube is also used as a water level indicator for inside your reservoir. So once you've drained your reservoir, you want to take your trays and your racking out. Now this already has the trays out, but it's important that you also take the tray plate and racking out as well in order to do that thorough cleaning inside the chamber. It's very easy to do. Some people are kind of intimidated by it. So what you want to do is you'll see some holes along the edges of your tray plate. Go to like the second one back, lift up and pull out towards you, and it comes off very, very easy, just like that. Now, once you have that out, you can clean your internal surfaces of your sterilizer. You will want to clean your tray plate, your racking, and your trays. You'll want to use a speed clean and distilled water solution. And then you'll want to rinse that off and dry it prior to reinstalling those trays, tray plate, racking. While you have this out though, you will want to make sure that everything is in good condition, whether it's your filters or your heating element. And that on a weekly basis is something you would kind of want to do just at a glance. So now let's go ahead and refill this sterilizer with distilled water so that you can use your sterilizer again, right? Well, this is the port that you put your distilled water in. Now I keep saying distilled. Distilled sometimes is difficult to come by, and it's not always feasible for every application, right? So there are alternatives, and Midmark did provide a very helpful water purity chart. It comes in your user guide, and it's right here. Can't see it real well, but that's okay. Just knowing that it's there, and you can have your water tested for the purity to know that it does fall within this guideline. If you don't have it within this guideline, you're asking for potential failures or issues, okay? That's why we provide it. So now moving on to the monthly maintenance. As I said, with the weekly maintenance, you're gonna get a reminder on your display every 7, 14, and 21 days. On the 28th day, it reminds you, hey, it's time to do your monthly maintenance. So that's a much more in-depth process of cleaning your sterilizer. It's very important to also note that whenever you're doing any of these maintenance cleaning procedures, you do need to use only speed clean. That is the one product that we have tested with the inside of our working solenoids and valves to know that it won't cause any issues, okay? So for the first step, we're gonna flush the system. We'll start out by draining the dirty water out of the reservoir and refilling it with clean distilled water. Once you've done that, you need to pour 1 ounce, and the ounces are clearly defined on the water, on the Speed Clean bottle, 1 ounce of Speed Clean directly into the bottom of the chamber, okay? Once you've done that, we'll go ahead and select a pouch cycle to run it through. That'll clean your valves internally. Before it gets to the drying portion of the cycle, because it doesn't need to dry in order just to clean those internal valves, you're going to press stop. It saves time. So once you've done that, gone through the pouch cycle, press stop. Then you'll want to, of course, open it up again, drain your reservoir, put new clean distilled water in it, and then you want to rinse that cleaning agent out of all of your internal valves. So again, you'll close the door and you'll press an unwrap cycle. It's a little bit shorter cycle just to flush that all through the system. And then again, once that cycle gets to the drying portion, then you'll want to press stop, save some time, and then drain it again. Once you've done that, you can fill it with clean distilled water, and then you're good to go for the next cycle. You're not finished with the monthly maintenance, however. It is imperative that when you're doing that, we clean the internal trays again. We want to clean the surfaces, do an in-depth clean of your trays, racking, tray plate. But not only that, we have chamber filters that need to be cleaned as well. There's 2 inside. These can be cleaned with a stiff bristled brush and speed clean, or you can throw it in your ultrasonic cleaner. Just make sure that cleaner, whatever agent you use, gets thoroughly cleaned and dried prior to reinstalling. Now there are 2 of these, so make sure you clean both of them. Those you'll want to inspect to see if they've gotten any wear or tear. They are a wear item that can be replaced. We kind of recommend annually on that. So the next step in the monthly maintenance is the door gasket. You want to take that out. You want to wipe this down, clean it, clean the internal surfaces of your door gasket housing, look for any damage or wear. Your door gasket is also an annual wear item as well. You do want to replace this on a yearly basis. So you want to make sure this is clean, reinstall it. And there is one other item that's a wear item, which is your door spring, which helps you open that door. So there's actually a preventative maintenance kit or a periodic maintenance kit that is available that you can get through your Benco dealer to replace all 3 of these items, the door gasket, the filter, and the door springs, to help promote longevity of your sterilizer through the years, along with that maintenance.
I think we're good.
Yes.
So thank you, Renee. And what we've got here again, that's a lot of content that Renee just covered. Don't worry about it. We've got it on your quick check list here. Make sure you keep this handy. We really appreciate your guys' time tonight and attention in this subject. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of the webinar. And I'm going to turn it back over to Chuck. Thank you, guys.
Sarah and the Midmark team, thank you very much. You guys are awesome. Not only is that good sterilization tips around the Midmark units, but most of what you said also applies to every other sterilizer in the market. So thank you very much, guys. You are awesome. Great job. Nice job.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
All right. Good, everybody. So without further ado, I want to turn things over to 3 experts who need just a slight introduction. So oftentimes at Benco, my job is to introduce outside speakers, big clinicians, Mark Zuckerberg's father. I mean, I get a lot of interesting people who come through these webinars. These 3 are 3 of my favorites. Dan Bump, Matt Kaskin, Curtis Carter are 3 of the leaders of Benco's field service team. Dan is our vice president of field service, so he runs the entire field service operation. Matt Kaskin and Curtis Carter are directors of different regions that we're in. One of the things that's very cool is that all 3 of them have actual in the field service experience throughout their careers. So these guys are not just guys who push a pencil around on a pad all the time. These guys have actually turned a wrench in dental offices across the United States throughout their career. They worked very hard to put together the material for tonight's program. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Dan, Matt, and Curtis. I assume that Dan is going to go first. Dan, before I turn things over exactly to you, we did get one question already, and that question was, could you repeat the email address in case you're on your phone? And the answer is yes, of course, practicecoaching@benco.com. That's practicecoaching@benco.com. That said, before I turn things exactly over to Dan, I want to remind everybody there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please put any questions you have as the program proceeds in that Q&A area. We're going to look at those at the end. We will have some time for questions and answers at the end for these gentlemen. Dan, Curtis, Matt, thank you very much. Turn things over to you. You're up.
Thank you, Chuck. And Chuck was right. We all have had time in the field, and that's where our passion is. Some of us are even a little more fanatical about equipment and equipment maintenance. So some of you might think that's boring. To us, it's kind of cool, and it's what we enjoy doing, which is why we're here. So first of all, thank you all for spending a Wednesday evening with us, or Wednesday afternoon, depending on where you are. We do appreciate you being here. We work hard to put the content together for you so that we hope that it's useful long after we're gone. But of course, if you ever need us, you know how to get a hold of us, and we'd be glad to refresh and go over anything that you may have missed. So you'll see in front of you is a nice graphic with some big numbers on it. And I use this as that dramatic capture of attention, because if you look at the bottom, our average dental offices, and the data was collected from Dental Intelligence, average offices is based over 15,000 offices. So the numbers are really legit. But if you look at that, the daily production for one day for the average office in our industry is about $6,000. Now, if you're a high performing office and you're in the, say, top 10% of offices, that number can creep up into the almost $9,000 per day of production. So what we're about to talk about has a lot of impact to your offices and your facilities, because as you can see, any time that you're not working is very expensive. So what our goal is in our field services is to increase your uptime. We want you working, and we want your maintenance and your equipment to be on par so that it keeps you working. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. We have a couple of objectives that we're going to try to meet for you. So the first one, we want you to understand your equipment factory maintenance guidelines. Number two, we're going to recognize the importance of your equipment maintenance. Number three, we're going to set up and maintain good dental equipment records. And number four, we're going to identify some really good questions you can ask when you're purchasing equipment. You just heard some suggestions. Maybe you picked up a few suggestions from our friends over at Midmark. So without further ado, I am going to introduce to you briefly Matt Kaskin. Matt is our field service director for our South District, and Curtis Carter, who is our field service director for the West District. So we're covering a good chunk of the country tonight. Matt comes to us with 20 years of experience in the field. Most recently was our service manager in one of our larger regions, which is the Citrus region in Florida. And Curtis comes to us from the sales side of our organization, but brings a skill set that was really important to us, because Curtis spent the majority of his 20-year career as an equipment sales specialist. So you'll see that all of us really have a passion around equipment. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and then I'll see you at the end here for some Q&A.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. As you can see, the course objectives are up there. I'm going to cover the first two. My background is more service, installations, preventive maintenance, and service repairs. And then I'm going to pass it over to Curtis, and he's going to talk a little bit more about equipment and asking the good equipment questions. I'm going to break it into four primary categories: your mechanical room, sterilization, core equipment, and technology finally. So let's go ahead and roll to the next slide, and we'll get started. So the first thing I wanted to cover before we get into actual maintenance of your mechanical room equipment is kind of the manufacturer guidelines, space requirements, ambient temperature, sound dampening, and then of course maintenance. If you can see the screens, you got a couple of pics up there. The one to the right is a very large, spacious mechanical room, and that's wonderful. That's a service tech's dream right there, but that's typically not what we find in your average dental office. The picture to the left is typically what you'll see, which is a much smaller closet, but you can see how well laid out this is, and it's not cluttered. That's basically what you want to look for when you're speccing out dental equipment. The manufacturers will recommend certain space requirements. They'll give you dimensions of the actual equipment, but they're also going to give you space requirements as well. So if for example, if an air compressor is 30 inches wide, they might require 33 or 34 inches. And if you're wondering why, it's because they've got to get airflow around this equipment. It does produce a lot of heat, and you want to make sure that you're giving it ample room so that the heat can dissipate and exit the equipment room. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so some things to consider when you're looking at your mechanical room maintenance. Filter changes. Most of your air compressors now are oilless, but they do have air filters that require changing. There are dryer assemblies that dry your air that goes into your delivery units, so your handpieces and syringes and so on and so forth. So those need to be changed out periodically. There's moisture indicators on the equipment itself, on the air compressors, so that you can monitor how dry your air is. We like to measure recovery time, and basically what that is, and that's very revealing for a service technician, is you want to be able to measure that recovery time. So what that is your tank on your air compressor holds a certain volume of air, and that's what delivers the air pressure to your operatories and all of your equipment. Typically at 80 pounds per square inch, the air compressor will turn on, it'll pump up to a certain pressure and then shut off. And we like to measure that recovery time. It's typically a minute and a half or whatever it is for that pump up time. And we can tell a lot from the performance of your air compressor. If that time starts to extend out, that's usually an indication that you've got something going on in the office, whether it be an air leak, or you've got some moisture in the tank and the compressor is having to work harder and that sort of thing. So we like to check that as well. Collection canisters, or solid collectors, we like to call them, on the vacuum pumps, they need to be changed out periodically. There's some screens in there that need to be changed out periodically. Vacuum systems, we look at oil changes. There's drive belts that need to be changed periodically. A lot of the dry vac systems, or all of the dry vac systems now, have holding tanks. Those need to be flushed out periodically. Vacuum lines also need to be flushed. One thing with dry vacuums, you want to make sure that you use a non-foaming cleaner. So like our partners at Midmark, they recommend certain cleaners for their products. You always want to make sure that you're using a manufacturer recommended cleaner when you're flushing your vacuum lines. And then another thing I wanted to mention was going back to the space requirements. You want to make sure that your mechanical room is big enough and climate controlled for your equipment. So heat and humidity are your main enemies for your mechanical room. So you want to make sure when you're setting these up, and again, these are kind of in the manufacturer guidelines, you want to make sure that you're providing cool, dry air to the room. You don't want to put these things outside. We've seen instances where, you know, they're outside in a shed, and being from Florida where I work, that's just not a good thing. You want to make sure when you're designing your office or you're upgrading your office, you're making sure that you provide a good, clean, you know, space with fresh air to put your utilities in, and try not to clutter up that area. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, this is a little survey we're doing, and I think we're going to share the results at the end. But how often do you or your service technician examine your mechanical room equipment? 1 daily, 2 weekly, 3 monthly, 4 yearly, or 5 what mechanical room? So we'll try to have a little fun with that. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, sterilization. Again, thanks again to our partners over at Midmark. That was a great presentation. Here's another area that requires a lot of maintenance and upkeep. You want to make sure you keep all this equipment running efficiently. Like a mechanical room, if your mechanical room goes down, you cannot treat your patients. Same thing in sterilization. You want to make sure that you're keeping up with the maintenance and upkeep on these things. The sterilizers, that was a great presentation, and like Chuck mentioned, that pretty much goes for all manufacturers' brands of sterilizers. Weekly cleaning is important, wiping them down, you know, cleaning out the chamber. The monthly cleaning is a little more involved. You could ask your local service technician. Most service companies offer monthly maintenance on sterilization room equipment. So if that's not something you're comfortable with, it is a little more involved. Like I said, check with your local service technician or service provider, because most companies do offer maintenance programs like that. In this picture as well, you can see an instrument washer there. Anybody that has those in their office, there's soaps and detergents that need to be changed out on a regular basis. And there's also some filters that need to be cleaned. So you want to make sure that you are using, again, manufacturer recommended soaps and cleaners and filters and so on. It's very, very important to use the right chemicals and the right detergents that correspond with the equipment that you have. In some cases, if you don't, it's pretty easy to tell, and a lot of times it'll void manufacturer warranties. So just make sure that you're using the recommended products. Ultrasonics, pretty simple, right? You just want to make sure that you're changing out the solutions regularly, usually daily, sometimes more, depends what kind of cases you're doing. And as far as the cabinetry and all that kind of stuff, no harsh abrasives. You want to make sure you're using, what the manufacturer recommends, and that's something I'll get into a little bit later with the operatories as well. But no harsh chemicals. Use the recommended cleaners. This stuff you want this stuff to last a long time, so just make sure that you're using the proper cleaners. Keep it looking nice and new. And we can go to the next one. Okay, again, routine cleaning, gaskets, seals, O-rings. Again, on the sterilizers that you guys saw previously, door gaskets, I can see a cassette sterilizer there in the picture. Those require changing out the seals inside. So, and one of the ways you can tell when those things start to fail, typically on the steam sterilizers, the larger ones that you see on the picture there in the left, they're going to start dripping a little bit of water just underneath the door. You'll start to see a little pool of water, and you may even see some steam leaking out. And on the cassette sterilizers, you'll definitely start to see some steam leaking. And then I also see looks like a water distiller up on the counter. So another reminder, all of these machines require distilled water only. I can tell you, if you don't use distilled water, you will run into problems very quickly. What will happen is the solenoids inside those machines will get gunked up and they will fail, and your sterilizers won't run. So very, very important to make sure that you're cleaning these things on a regular basis and following the manufacturer guidelines. I can tell you just from prior experience, if you maintain this equipment and you service them at the recommended intervals, they will run and run and run. They're workhorses. They work really well. They're very dependable, very reliable. 9 times out of 10, when we go out, when we're dispatched out, or your service technician, whoever you use, when they're dispatched out to service your equipment and it's broken down, it's usually because it's not being properly maintained. So it's very, very important to keep this equipment, working properly and staying with the recommended intervals. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, here's our next survey. Spore testing, and our partners at Midmark mentioned this as well. How often are you spore testing your sterilizers? Daily, weekly, monthly, or what's a spore test? I would recommend you get with your local infection control specialist. I'm pretty sure most of you have one. If not, you probably need to get one. There are a lot of different regulations and requirements that vary from state to state. So just make sure you're working with your infection control specialist and finding out how often you have to, turn those test results in. So it's very, very important. Keep records of all of that kind of stuff as well. All right, so the next area we're going to talk about is technology. We're talking about your imaging, your CBCTs, your intraoral X-rays, your handhelds, scanners, mills, sensors, computers, software, everything technology, right? Not a ton of maintenance on this equipment, but again, there are certain things that have to be done, especially on the CBCTs. There's yearly calibrations, beam alignments, things like that that need to be checked. It really varies from manufacturer to manufacturer. Again, you got to follow their guidelines and make sure that you're keeping these keeping this equipment, I'm sorry, running properly. Sensors, computers, software, that sort of thing. Again, not a ton of maintenance here. I think the biggest thing that I would recommend that you're doing is doing your daily backups. I'm not sure how many folks do them themselves, but there are many companies out there that provide that service, and it's super, super, super important. We've had some customers, unfortunately, that were not. They thought they were backing up daily, and they thought they were getting accurate backups, and then they had a situation where a computer went down or a hard drive failed or something, and only to find out that they didn't have accurate backups. So I highly recommend you get a backup service. They back up to the cloud. They verify the backups daily, and they always have them on hand, so that if you ever have any kind of a disaster at all or any kind of failure, it's easy to recover your data. So I think we can go to the next slide. I think I probably mentioned a little more of that. Yeah. So again, state regulated calibrations. There are some states that require yearly calibrations of your X-ray equipment. Others don't. Again, get with your local rep, equipment specialist, or service technician. They can help you with that. A lot of states don't require it, but a lot do. So you just want to make sure that you're keeping up to date on that kind of stuff. Software upgrades and antivirus, those are big ones. And I think Curtis is going to talk a little bit about that later on. Typically when you purchase a practice or you upgrade equipment, you're going to load the latest version of software for that particular piece of equipment. And then you tend to kind of forget about it after a while because everything's working fine. You might get emails, hey, it's time to upgrade, or hey, you can get the latest version of this and that. And again, because everybody, everything seems to be working fine, you kind of put it on the back burner and forget about it until you go to purchase another piece of equipment. When you try to integrate something that's newer into your office and you've got older version of software, that's typically when you start running into problems. So you just want to make sure that you stay with the latest updates, stay with your upgrades, your practice management software. There's new versions that come out. You want to make sure you stay up to date, because if you try to go back, 4 or 5 years later and try to incorporate new equipment into your practice, it becomes a nightmare because you're way too far behind. Antivirus is another very, very important thing to make sure that you keep up with. And again, there are a lot of companies that provide this service and they take care of everything for you and you don't have to worry about it. Super, super important. We've had, unfortunately, a lot of customers that have gotten viruses, and it can wreak havoc on your practice management, all your data, patient files, X-rays, everything. It's there's malware out there. There's all kinds of things, and ransomware is a big thing right now. They seem to be targeting dentistry lately. We've had several customers lately that they've been asked to pay ransoms upwards of $10,000-$20,000. So you want to make sure that your antivirus is up to date and accurate data backups. So we can go to the next one. Okay. So yeah, who does your backup, right? We still use tape drives. Hopefully nobody's still using tape drives. Backup to the cloud, which is obviously a good solution. And again, I would recommend that you have somebody, monitoring that for you so that you have accurate backups. We use a specific data backup service. We don't use computers. So, well, I'm curious to see how these surveys come out at the end. We can go ahead and go to the next one, please. Thank you. Okay, so finally, core equipment, chairs, units, lights, deliveries, stools, cabinetry, the whole thing. This is super, super important, right? This is where you're going to spend most of your day. This is where your staff is spending most of their day. And this is where your patients are spending most of their time. So This obviously is a brand new office in the picture, if you're looking at the picture, and this is the way you want to keep it looking. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining this equipment. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces, and there's water flowing through most of your equipment. So things do wear out a little bit, and it does require regular maintenance. Again, lots of moving parts and pieces. One thing I just noticed, and I didn't even think about it till now, you can see water bottles on these delivery units. You should never, ever be using city water anymore. You should have an advanced water filtration system, either coming from your mechanical room directly to your delivery units, or use water bottles. City water just destroys all the internal components of your delivery units. So if you're on city water, you really need to get off of it. And most manufacturers now, when you purchase new equipment, they don't even have an option for you to hook up to city water. It's strictly an air hookup. And then, like I said, you have bottled water. So if you're going to use city water and you're purchasing new equipment, you need to let your equipment specialist know that, because there really aren't provisions for you to hook up to city water anymore. Can we go to the next one? Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, lots of moving parts and pieces. If you look at those dental lights and you look at the delivery units, there's a lot of movement up and down, sideways, back and forth. And most of those joints and pivot points, they have stops in there, and adjustments. Some people like it to be a little stiff and rigid. Other people like to have it loose. There's adjustments that can be made to all of those so that it meets your comfort level. But they do tend to loosen up over time, and they do require adjustment. There's gaskets, O-rings, water valves. If you look on the floor, you can see the foot control. There's toggle valves on there. They're made out of plastic, and you kick them 200-300 times, and they tend to break off. And so they do require regular maintenance. As far as your cabinetry, like I mentioned, in sterilization, you want to make sure you're using non-abrasive cleaners. The manufacturer will recommend what to use on your work surfaces, on your upholstery, and your cabinetry as well. Even your plastic covers, everything. The worst thing you can do is use harsh abrasive cleaners. It will yellow your equipment in a hurry. You can see right there, you get that nice gray upholstery and nice gray covers, and it really looks pretty. You start wiping that down with harsh cleaners, it'll turn yellow really quick and it'll look terrible. So you want to make sure you're using the approved cleaners. I think on upholstery, most manufacturers are going to recommend like a mild soap and water solution. But again, you want to check with the manufacturer. All of your equipment will come with guidelines on what to use and what not to use. So again, you want to make sure you're adhering to those guidelines, because you want to keep this stuff looking great. The other thing I want to mention, there are a lot of little nuisance things that you tend to get used to during the day. If you hear, hissing sounds when you're treating patients, and there's noises coming out of your delivery units, or when you step on your rheostat, you're getting a hissing sound. I mean, those are air leaks, and they're usually just wear and tear items. They're usually not a big deal. Most service companies offer preventive maintenance contracts, and those are simple fixes. We get in there quarterly or biannually or annually. And I guess my point is, don't live with the aggravation. If you have a light that's sagging, or an X-ray arm that's drifting, or a delivery unit that's dripping water, those are typically easy fixes. And I hate to see people kind of live with the aggravation because they think it's going to be an expensive fix. It's usually not. It's usually very inexpensive. Only takes a few minutes to fix. These adjustments on all of this equipment, it's typically very simple. Again, there's Allen screws and stops on all these pivot points. They do loosen up over time, and it's usually just a quick adjustment. So don't live with the aggravation. You guys spend a lot of time in these operatories. You want to make sure that you're keeping them functioning as they should, like new. Okay, that's pretty much it for the dental equipment side and following manufacturer guidelines. So I'm going to turn it over to Curtis, and he's going to talk a little bit about maintaining good equipment records and great questions to ask for when purchasing dental equipment. Curtis?
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. So a ton of good information there. Thanks a lot, Matt. I appreciate it. Just going through your presentation, it keyed me on a couple of items I want to mention as well. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is setting up and maintaining good dental equipment records. And just, listening to Midmark's excellent presentation and Matt's, I was thinking about all the information that the manufacturers include with their equipment when you purchase new equipment, how to clean it, what the warranty is, the procedures for all the maintenance. And I think that's the number one first obvious reason why it's important to have good equipment records. You need to have a place that you keep all of that information. So, a log, a 3-ring binder like we got pictured here, something that's prominent in the office and labeled to everyone knows, where it is and what's in it is going to be key. Why is it important? It's going to help keep your existing equipment running reliably. This whole program is really about uptime, reducing downtime, which is costly to your bottom line and to your practice. It's going to help extend the life of the equipment because you can monitor your maintenance and make sure that it's getting done correctly. The other thing, and I don't think a lot of people think about this, but if you are maintaining good equipment records, it's going to help you plan for replacement equipment purchases. Now, in this log, you're going to want it to include, the purchase dates for all the equipment. You're going to want to include all the preventive maintenances that you have done, all the repairs when things do break and you have to have them repaired. You want to include the original invoices for the purchase of the equipment and the invoices for the repairs. Part of the reason for that is those invoices typically will include the serial numbers for the equipment. So you've kind of got a tracking record there. This could also help you if you're having chronic issues with a piece of equipment. You can track it to that serial number, if you have multiples of the equipment. But if you ever get into a situation where you need a warranty replacement on equipment. I mean, occasionally there are these, the pieces of equipment, I kind of like to call them the Friday at 5 pieces of equipment that, have some chronic issues. And if you've ever had that and you've got a nice clean log of all the repairs that you've done to it, tied to the serial number and dated, you've got a pretty easy, case to present to the manufacturer for a warranty replacement. A log is especially helpful for handpieces. So you're keeping track of, repairs on them. At some point it makes more sense to, replace them than it does to continue to repair them. But it can also help you with identifying potential issues, like Matt said, with how it's being maintained. You've got different people working in the offices. You might have, several dental assistants that are maintaining the equipment properly, but maybe you identify some that aren't. Just going back to one piece of equipment that I'm kind of passionate about is the Handpiece lubrication and cleaning system. If you've got one of the manual units where you have to hold it on there and it's a manual process that the assistant has to do, there's no consistency typically on the cleaning and the lubrication that's being done there. So I really recommend, a lubrication system. There are a bunch of different ones on the market. They're automated. You put the hand pieces on there, you hit the button, and you know that they're being maintained properly. And in fact, on some of them, it will actually extend the warranty on your hand pieces if you are using a handpiece lubrication system. Anyway, if you don't have one of these logs already, which many of you probably don't, your dental distributor can help. You can have an equipment specialist, field service technician come out, walk through your office, go through each piece of equipment. You can build the log that way. And while they're doing that, they can evaluate the condition of the equipment, whether it's in good condition or a poor condition, and then what the life expectancy on that equipment might be. That'll give you a good starting point moving forward. So let's go to the next piece. Budgeting for equipment purchases. This is another reason that I think maintaining good dental equipment records is important and how it can help you. Now, I'm not a tax or financial expert, but and you should always contact your financial team with regards to these type of decisions in your practice. But I do know that most large businesses have a replacement equipment budget. It's a line item in their budget, like labor or insurance or taxes, what have you. And most dental practices that I've worked with don't have a replacement equipment budget. I know at Benco, we have a replacement equipment budget for items in our distribution centers, in our home offices, fans for our field service technicians, laptops for our salespeople. That's all in an annual budget. And I highly recommend that you incorporate that into your annual budget. That equipment log can help you identify what that number should look like. You can set aside a certain amount of money each year. If you don't end up using it all, you can carry that money over and then reevaluate the next year on what the new budget would be. Now, if you have a relatively new office, you probably have a bunch of relatively new equipment that you purchased at the same time. And so you may not be expecting to have a whole lot of replacement equipment yet. Keep in mind, if you build a new office and you buy a bunch of new equipment, all that equipment is going to become old at about the same time. So at some point, all that new equipment is going to become old equipment and it's going to start to go. So if you keep that replacement equipment budget in hand over the years, you're going to be able to handle those investments, with no problem. It's not a bad idea also to incorporate a budget for new equipment. Should you want to add procedures that require more equipment, if you're going to add endo or implants or something like that to your practice. So I think that's another reason why, good equipment records are important. So next we're going to talk about, I got one more piece on this. So we can go to the next slide too. And Matt touched on this as well. So if we can bump forward to the next slide, please. Yeah, Matt touched on this technology. It's going to be important to keep good records on your versions for all your software and everything. I like this graphic up here because I can't tell you how many times I've seen, a practice sets up, again, they get all new computers, they get new imaging software, new practice management software, they get it all in place and then they work. And over a period of years, it's all fine. But then you want to upgrade or replace a piece of equipment. And, if your pano goes down, you decide to invest in a 3D cone beam. Well, that's going to have new imaging software. It's going to require new drivers. And the compatibility with your existing practice management software, which could be tied to your operating software, which could be tied to the computer hardware and the device drivers. You know, it becomes a little bit of a domino effect. So maintaining the latest versions of the software will help, you know, keep that from becoming as large an issue. But it's definitely something you want to plan for ahead. That kind of segues into our next section. And this is identifying great questions to ask when purchasing equipment. So this really it speaks to me strongly in my previous history. I was a manufacturer's representative for a bunch of dental equipment companies, or a couple of them. And then I was an equipment specialist for quite a few years as well. And so I've got a pretty exhaustive list here. We'll run through a few of them, maybe that are more obvious, and then some that might not be. So I think it's important when you're looking at purchasing some replacement equipment to make sure you've got the right mindset. So I would encourage you to ask yourself, how does this piece of equipment help me do better dentistry, or do more dentistry, or do dentistry more efficiently? And when I say do more dentistry, I don't mean more like volume of the same dentistry. That would be more efficiency, but more kinds of dentistry. So does it let you do more types of procedures like endo or implants or dental sleep medicine, some of those aspects? If it does, then it's adding value to your practice, to your business, and for your patients. So I think we can move to the next slide. All right, so questions to ask when purchasing equipment. So who are you going to ask these questions to? You're going to ask them to your equipment specialist that you're working with. You can ask your field service technicians. You can ask your manufacturer representatives. I a lot of times have heard doctors talk about, you know, they got recommended a piece of equipment, or they kind of are down on a piece of equipment because they, you know somebody that had a piece of equipment that either had a good or bad experience. You know, while that does have some impact, keep in mind that you might be hearing from, you know, a colleague that bought a piece of equipment and didn't have a great experience. And so he told you how terrible, or she told you how terrible it is. Well, that was one piece of equipment from one person, and you really don't know the full story. Was it being maintained correctly? Was it the right equipment for what the person needed? It's very anecdotal. So I really encourage you to talk to your equipment specialists and your field service technicians. They have sold many, and installed and maintained many numbers of this equipment. Hundreds of sterilizers, hundreds of x-rays, hundreds of compressors. And so they're going to have a lot better feel for what products are reliable, what products have really good features and benefits, etc. So those are the type of the people that you can ask these questions. You know, if you're talking to your equipment specialist, your field service technician, you can ask them about, you know, how is the manufacturer's support for this equipment? Are they there when you need them? What are the wait times when you do need to call in for support? You know, that could be technical support for software, technology, you know, any number of things. Pretty obvious question is, what is the warranty? But the next two questions, if you dive a little deeper, you may not know that some equipment have different warranties on the different components. You know, the tube head and a cone beam or a pano may have a different warranty than the lift motor or the motherboard or some of those other components. Same thing on a compressor. You know, the heads on the compressors may have a different warranty than some of the electrical components on there. So it's a good question. What's the parts warranty versus the labor warranty? I often hear the word warranty just thrown out there in general. You'd say, oh, it's got a 5-year warranty. Well, is that a 5-year parts warranty? Is it a 5-year labor warranty? Is it both? So it's important to know the difference between those two. I've got a few more here. There we go. How is the local manufacturer representative support? This could be important because you may be getting in services from the local manufacturer's representatives in your area. Does the equipment come with in-office training? Does it come with training in office, a person there? Is it online? Is it a video? Is it an in-service, or are they actually bringing in someone that is specifically a trainer? These are great questions. Depending on the product, the training may be more important or less important. Are there additional components or add-on options needed? This is a good one. There's a lot of different aspects to that you could talk about, but it's a good question to make sure of. I think about things like, cone beams. There's different components of software that you can use, things like model scanners where you can actually scan your model in the cone beam. So you want to make sure you find out about all those things. Compatibility with existing software and hardware, we kind of covered that. Is remote support included? And I think actually we already had this question in the chat. What is the lead time to receive equipment? This is absolutely critical right now. The supply chain in the world is very disrupted right now. So we do see increased lead times. Now, it really varies by the type of equipment and it varies by the manufacturer. All the different manufacturers get their different, raw materials and components from different places, and it's really just depends. And I will tell you right now, it's a moving target, and it is changing. Some lead times are starting to get shorter. Sometimes they're still, some of them are still moving out. But absolutely, please ask that question at the point of purchase, so you know and can plan ahead of time. Next slide. I apologize if I'm going a little fast, but we got a lot of questions here and we're coming close to our end time. How long has a specific model been in production or on the market? If this is the first year out, then it's not going to have a long track record for reliability. That may not matter to you, but maybe it is important. Can the equipment be upgraded without being fully replaced? I love this one. There are dry vac units out there on the market when you can buy them and set them up for a 3 to 4 user practice. And then if you're going to add a couple more operatories, we can actually come in and upgrade your existing unit to be able to handle increased capacity for another couple of operatories. Those type of things. You see that in technology as well. So it's a great question. Cost of ownership. This is big too, especially on technology that has, monthly service fees or connectivity fees. What does that look like over 3 to 5 years versus maybe a competitive product that there aren't any service fees? You might pay more upfront, but you're not paying, you may be paying less over a period of time. Let's skip to the next one. How do patients like this equipment? And how do staff, what do staff like about this equipment? Touch on this for 1 second here. Sometimes we think about buying a dental chair and it's like, how comfortable is it for the patient? It's also really important to think about how is your, how are the hygienists going to be able to get good accessibility to the oral cavity in this particular chair? Is it narrow so it's easy to get around, or is it not so narrow? Those type of things. So look at it from both points of view. Are there trade-ins or trade-ups? Is there a site check needed prior to the installation of the equipment? These are great questions to know before you purchase it. Let's move, I think, to the last slide here, because these are really important. This starts to get a little bit more into that installation piece. Does my IT person or company need to be on site for installation? The answer to that question, if it's technology, is 99% of the time, yes. But still ask the question. They may not need to be on site for the entire installation. Maybe during the beginning or maybe at the end. You know, your installer for your technology typically is not going to know how your network is mapped. It's not going to know how to get around your firewalls, et cetera, et cetera. Next question would be, how long will the installation take? Plan enough time. If your installation is going to take 1 to 3 hours, plan for 3. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. Best practice. You will have way less stress if you go that route. Does the office need to be down for the equipment to be installed? Obviously, compressors, vacuums, you're going to be shut down. You're not going to be able to see patients. Last two here are, is there any construction or physical modifications needed to accommodate this space in my practice? So, you know, you can replace a 2D panel with a cone beam. It may be larger. You're going to add a SEF arm to it. You may not have enough space. You need to identify all that stuff before you purchase the equipment. And then the last one, this is one of my favorites. Is there anywhere I can go to see the equipment before I purchase it? Put your hands on it, touch it, feel it, look at it, get a feel for what the quality of the equipment is before you're purchasing it. When you can do that, it's always the best practice. And if you do that regularly, when you try to look online at a picture or on a brochure to evaluate the quality of a piece of equipment, it kind of seems silly. So where you can, I definitely encourage you to put hands on the equipment. And I think that's all I have.
All right, Curtis. Thank you very much. This is Chuck, Dan, Matt, Curtis. Are you guys all done with the formal part of the presentation? If so, we have some time for Q&A, I think.
Yes, sir.
All right, great. Well, let's do a couple questions here. One of the questions I think is pretty easy is there a video of this recorded program so that they can show to their coworkers? The answer is yes, there is. Alyssa or Kay, can you help us understand where that's going to be and how long it will take to get it up and posted?
Absolutely, Chuck. The webinar will be posted in Benco Dental U within 2 days after the webinar tonight. So ideally, we like to have them posted to Benco Dental U by Friday, and we can always send you an email with the information to access that course.
Excellent. Something to look forward to. Thank you very much. That's a good sign that people were paying attention and they want to see it again. How do I get calibration done for my X-ray units? Who provides the service?
I'll take that one. So most service providers do provide that service. Again, it varies from state to state. The one thing you need to be careful of, in most municipalities, a CBCT machine, that has to be completed by a physicist. So again, it varies from state to state. Just make sure you check with your local municipalities. And again, CBCTs, you're probably going to have to get a physicist.
So Matt, just to follow up on that, if I need some information on where to go, I probably should start with my regular field service technician, a Benco technician, or whoever you're doing your service. They will help, but also checking on websites for the state, right? I think it's state regulations, not local regulations, right? Yes,
agreed.
Yep.
And I think your local rep would probably have that information for you, or your service tech. They're pretty familiar with the laws and regulations for the state because of the paperwork that they have to fill out when they're installing the units. So
great, thank you very much. And people should expect to pay a charge for that, right? It's a calibration service, so you're gonna have someone come out, and you have to make sure that it's not usually a free service, nor should it be. I think there's an expert involved, so people should be aware that it's a chargeable service.
Yes, it's typically a flat rate. It's not an hourly thing, so yeah, just check with your local service provider. It's usually a flat rate.
Perfect, thank you.
Per unit.
Love this question from Dr. O'Rourke Allen. How long should chairs and autoclaves last? I have a feeling I know where the answer is going to go here, so let me start. If you take care of them, a long time. If you don't take such good care of them, they won't last quite as long. And of course, it helps you if you buy quality product in the beginning. Dan, why don't I turn things over to you to add to that?
No, I think it's a great question. It's one that we get asked often. So there's a couple ways to answer it. Of course, Chuck hit the first one. How do you treat it? It's just like maintenance on anything you buy. So you think your car, if it's maintained properly, it lasts a long time. However, this is going back to what Curtis's recommendation is I would talk to your equipment specialist and your service tech, whoever that is, and ask them for their input. What do they see from a reliability standpoint? You can always compare that to how a manufacturer warranties their product. If a manufacturer feels very confident that their product is durable, will last a long time, they typically have a longer warranty period. So there's a couple of variables in there. And then, of course, it all comes down to how it's treated and how it's used and abused. And I think Chuck said it right up at the very beginning. You can buy quality equipment and it's going to last you a long time. We have seen some equipment. We don't recommend this. But we've seen some equipment in offices that is 30 plus years old.
It's true.
We all have, right?
And it looks good after 30 years. If it's
Still
well
looks good,
maintained.
which
Yep.
means it was treated with exceptional care. So it does last that long.
Yep. I would add to what Dan said. The specific question was around chairs and autoclaves. As a general rule, I think most offices that are well run and take care of equipment should get 10 years out of a chair, probably longer. You may have to reupholster it along the way. And at Benco, we do offer reupholstery services. There are others that do. When it comes to an autoclave, I think you're talking 6 to 8 years, depending on how often you cycle it and how often you use it. I don't know if you guys have a different opinion of that. I don't think it's quite as long as a chair, but I think you ought to get a good 6 to 8 years out of a good solid autoclave. And by the way, everyone should have at least one, probably 2 autoclaves working in their office to cycle instruments through faster and also to make sure that there's a backup in case something bad happens. Matt, Curtis, Dan, you buy those numbers?
Agree.
I agree. I would just throw out there real quick that, I would encourage you to reupholster your chairs, fairly regularly too. It's just a great way to make your office look a lot nicer with some reupholstery.
I'll also turn things over to Sarah and her team to answer this question too. You guys make autoclaves and chairs. How would you answer that question?
Totally agree with you, Chuck. Well maintained, depends on how you treat it. Are you taking care of it? With our autoclaves, we recommend like 7 years or 10,000 cycles. Again, depending on how busy your office is and how much you're using it, it's going to have an impact. And if you're doing that monthly maintenance, just like an oil change with the car that you drive, you want to make sure you're doing that monthly maintenance and you'll get the most out of it. And with chairs, totally agree. Make sure you're inspecting your chair for holes or cracks in that upholstery where, bad things get in there. A patient safety perspective.
And at the risk of starting an uncomfortable conversation, Dan, did you want to add something there?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say at the risk of adding a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation, because it wasn't what these gentlemen talked about. My experience is when it comes to autoclaves and not necessarily chairs, because I think the question was really more about operatory equipment. A lot of it has to do with the quality of the water. And I think that is probably the most underrated, undervalued issue about dental equipment. At least in my mind, wiping everything down is important, but more important, anything that runs with water in your practice, which would be every dental operatory piece of, every dental unit, dental delivery system, and every sterilizer, water is key. My observation is when the water is of high quality, when you're using the distilled water as the Midmark folks recommend, when you're using high quality water, and if you don't have high quality local water, if you're running it filtered through your system, if you have a high quality of water going through this equipment, you have a much better chance of it lasting longer. When you don't take care of the water, or you have poor quality water, or you're not paying as much attention to the water, my observation is it may not happen right away, but over time, things start to corrode and things don't do well. So that's the thing I think that most offices don't pay enough attention to. Anybody have anything they want to add there?
No, the only thing I was going to add too, Chuck, is if longevity is a goal, and I think it should be with anybody's equipment, is obviously talk to your service providers. A lot of times they'll offer what we call preventive maintenance programs, where they're coming in and they're maintaining the equipment for you. That also prevents major breakdowns. We see things long before a major breakdown can happen. We illustrated the numbers at the beginning. So that's an important thing that can create some longevity for you as well.
Yeah, good stuff. Let's do one more question. I do know we're a little bit over, but I want to end things up. So on the topic we talked about before, do you have to clean water lines if you use bottled water at your chair? That we get that question a lot. I'll open up to anybody who wants to answer that question, including our friends at Midmark who certainly know about water and clean water. Somebody want to take that?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. Even if you're using distilled water or filtered water, you want to flush your lines, particularly on the weekend. If you're shutting down on a Friday and not coming back till Monday, it's very easy to empty that water bottle on your delivery unit and just flush air. So once you empty that water out and you hit the hand pieces and the air water syringe, you're blowing air through that system and you're getting all of the water out. Any water that sits in dark tubing, up underneath the delivery unit for any amount of time, it's going to start, creating biofilm. So yes, you want to flush it as best you can, especially for any extended period of time.
And can you use distilled water in a dental delivery system with a clean water system? Can you and should you, or should you just use filtered water or regular tap water?
So all of the above, really. Yes, you can use distilled water. If you don't have a water distiller, that can get pretty expensive. Most suppliers have tablets where you can use actual tap water. Some that come to mind, ICX. There's a ton of them out there, but the tablets are just as good. They cut down, make sure you don't grow biofilm and that sort of thing. So the answer is all of the above. Highly, great filtered water. If you've got a filtration system in your mechanical room, distilled or tablets, but you should definitely, I agree with you, never use city water. It's a bad idea. Make sure
I would say
filtration.
I would say lots and lots. I don't even know what percentage of the issues that we see revolve around water quality.
Absolutely.
Midmark ladies, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, go ahead, Renee. One thing I kind of was thinking along those lines is water tablets is great for cleaning biofilm, but it's very, very important for you to follow the recommended use for that so that those tablets dissolve completely, because the tablets can actually cause issues if they get into the lines prior to, they're dissolved, and that can cause blockages.
So you always want to follow the instructions for use of the unit that you have on your chair. They'll map out the details of the protocol that would be recommended for for your units, for sure.
Wait, are you saying that we as dental professionals should read the instructions? That's a new concept for us. We are scientists in general. We have been to years and years of professional school, and yet you're expecting us to actually read the directions. That's a tall order, ladies. I'm not sure that we always know how to do that.
It's a good place to start. It's a good place to start. Again, if you want your equipment to hang around for a little longer than it, for what it's supposed to, we kind of recommend that for sure.
Yeah, definitely recommend it. I'm making fun, of course, but I mean, dental professionals oftentimes are not known for reading the instructions. These are situations where they should, because when it comes to something like water or other things, the instructions for the kind of water and how to treat the water are different for your sterilizer, for example, than they are for your dental unit. So just because water is used in different things doesn't mean that the instructions for everything are going to be the same. And I think that's really, whatever you're talking about in the dental office, there's stuff on YouTube, there's manufacturer's instructions. It's easy to get your hands on. You can ask your field service technician to help. But when it's all said and done, there's a reason why these companies recommend looking at the directions prior to using, and really to make sure that you've got the right instructions posted around your office and the training happens, whether it's from your field service technician or the manufacturer's representative. That is the secret to not having aggravation and to having this stuff last a long time. So with that, Dan, Curtis, Matt, Sarah, and Renee, thank you very much for being here tonight. It was a really great program. It is recorded and we will post it within 2 days at the Benco U website. I'm going to turn things over to Kay to talk for a few minutes about upcoming programs that we have and to close us off. Thanks everybody for being here.
Yeah, I want to say you guys did an amazing job. You know, we put this webinar together because we're out there and we hear this, and this is something that everyone really wanted to know. It's funny when you co-travel, all of a sudden you get this phone call and there's sterilizers out. They're like, help, help. So I love the whole idea about being preventative. So I really appreciate your time. You did an amazing job on the presentation. So thank you. Chuck, there was one more question. There was asking about, do we have like a laminate that Benco does, like, do we have anything that we could send out or like get to the TRs? Is there?
We do. We have a poster for the offices that goes over preventive maintenance. Can you hold that up, Curtis? It's a beautiful thing. Maintenance and uptime, do it yourself. Any Benco customer can request one from their sales rep, and we're happy to provide it. As well, Kay, we can ask people to send specifically to practicecoaching@benco.com, and perhaps you guys can send them out too if people do ask for them. But we're very happy about that. It's a great service, and also the folks from Midmark talked about theirs before. So yes, we do have it from Benco. We are happy to provide it at no charge.
Fantastic. So we'll just make sure they get those out there because that was one of the most important questions, I think. And then one more question, then we'll close out. What about the design seminar? Is that something that someone can actually come to that's thinking about doing changes? Do we have that where they can actually go through it?
Yeah, so it's very exciting. We have not yet gone back to full in-person seminars at Benco, but we do have our Build Your Future seminar, which was the most popular, and we would argue the best, in-person seminar that we took the time to film during COVID, and it's now offered for free. Some of our competitors do offer their version of, which is not as good, for $1,000. Ours is free. You can find it at Benco U. You can Google Build Your Future Benco and you'll find it. It's, I believe, 12 modules available for watching, all about the ins and outs for how to design and redesign your office and how to do a great facility. So Build Your Future, Benco U, no charge. Happy to provide the service to our customers and friends and prospects.
Fantastic. Well, listen, what we're going to do tonight is, because we're running a little bit over, but these questions were really good, we'll make sure they all get answered and everyone gets a copy. And then what we'll also do is I will send you out the upcoming webinars and also the upcoming workshop. It'll be with your certifications. And I'll also be sending out a survey. Please make sure you fill that survey out, send it in. We really want to know what you want to see and how we can help you. So I'll end it with that and say thank you to everyone. It was a great webinar tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Great job,
Thanks,
Chuck.
Midmark. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.